Have you ever wondered what would be the most annoying commander deck ever? And just how many counterspells would be in it? Well, I wondered the same thing, and the answer is 43. There are 43 counterspells in this deck. What I wanted to do here was see what would happen if I made a deck entirely out of counterspells. And after thinking about it for about 20 seconds, I realized that wouldn't work. Because while yes, you would be able to counter a lot of spells, you still need to be able to win the game somehow. Not to mention you also have to play lands. But 43 is still a lot of counterspells, and the number of cards in the deck which are not counterspells and not lands are very few. And you probably want to know who could be the commander for a deck like this. Well, it's none other than our boy Talrand Sky Summoner. And Talrand is actually the perfect commander for this deck, because what other reason could possibly warrant Talrand needing to be reprinted in every Master set ever? But also, Talrand's ability is perfect for this deck because it says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So that means with Talrand as our commander, we don't really need to do anything other than play Talrand, counter anything that matters, and then kill our opponents with the drakes that we make when we counter spells. And it might seem like that's too simple of a plan to actually work, but at the end of this video, you can watch some gameplay footage of the deck in action, and it actually does work exactly that way. Now, let's take a closer look at some of the specific cards in this deck. For this video, we're using our Halloween 2023 playmat from Dragon Shield, and we also have matching sleeves to go with our Talrand deck. These go great with the Halloween season, which we're currently in as I film this video, and while Talrand is not necessarily as spooky as Commander, he might scare your opponents away from ever wanting to play with you again. These products are available from Dragon Shield, and if you'd like to purchase them and help out the channel while you do so, you can follow my affiliate links in the description of this video. So let's start off with the 1 mana counterspells. These are very important, because you want to get Talrand in play as soon as possible, but also you want to have counterspells up in order to be able to protect your Talrand. Dispel, Spell Pierce, and Swan Song are your pretty standard 1 mana counterspells. We can counter instant sorceries and enchantments, things like that, with these counterspells. An Offer You Can't Refuse is a fairly new one, which is also pretty cool. We can counter a non-creature spell, its controller creates 2 treasure tokens, so a lot of the time it can actually be beneficial to counter your own spell with this to ramp you, and also make a Drake with Talrand. And I like this particular Offer I Can't Refuse because this is from some guy in Toronto, which was given to me at one of the face-to-face games events in Toronto and signed right here. Next up, we've got one that probably isn't as popular as the others, but it's still pretty cool. This is Wash Away. It is a 1 mana counterspell, however, you can counter a spell that wasn't cast from its owner's hand. You can counter any spell if you pay the cleave cost, but basically I see this as 1 mana counter target commander. And then this last one is pretty cool here, Abjure. This is kind of perfect for the Talrand deck, because this is just a blue sacrifice a blue permanent, counter target spell. Well, fortunately, these drakes are blue, so with Talrand here, we can go 1 mana, sacrifice a drake, counter a spell, make a drake. Next up, we've got 12 2 mana counter spells, starting off with Actual Counterspell. We're also running Mana Drain, Essence Scatter, Negate, Arcane Denial, and Mana Leak. Mana Leak probably being the worst of those, seeing as it doesn't always actually counter something. And then on bottom here, we've got a few that are a little bit less standard than the ones on top. We've got Remand. This is actually very good for Talrand though, because it's basically a counter spell which lets us make a Drake and draw a card for just 2 mana. It puts the spell into the opponent's hand instead of the graveyard, but that's okay because we're getting a lot of value out of this card. We also have this Tail's End, which counters an activated ability, triggered ability, or legendary spell. Fortunately, all commanders are legendary. Got a Disdainful Stroke, we can counter things that cost 4 or greater. Narset's Reversal is very cool. We can copy an instant or sorcery, then return it to its owner's hand, and choose new targets for the copy. One thing that you want to do probably a lot of the time with this is counter your own spell with this. You can get an extra trigger out of Talrand that way, and you can do some pretty tricky stuff with this one right here. Also, Mission Briefing. This isn't actually a counterspell, but I have it in the counterspells here because It lets us rebuy a counterspell out of our graveyard. It says Surveil 2, then choose an instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. If the card will be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So this isn't with the 2 mana counterspells here, but it's really more like a 3 or 4 mana one because it costs 2 and then you have to pay for the thing that you cast from your graveyard. But we have some 1 mana or even 0 mana counterspells we could rebuy out of the graveyard. I really like this one though because it's 2 Talrand triggers on 1 card. And then there's this Wizard's Retort. It says 3 here, but it costs 2 really because it says it costs 1 less if we control a wizard. And fortunately, Talrand is a wizard. At 3 mana here, we've got Urtai's Scorn. This is very similar to Wizard's Retort. It costs 3 mana, it costs a blue less if an opponent casts 2 or more spells this turn, so it could cost 2. But I feel like it's going to cost 3 more often than Wizard's Retort would. Whirlwind Denial is very cool because it can counter multiple things and also it counters spells and abilities that opponents control. Archmage's Charm is just very flexible with the 3 modes on it there. Disallow, also very flexible. We can counter a spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. And then Unwind allows us to counter a non-creature spell and then untap up to 3 lands. So this one's good because it can allow us to leave up more mana. Here we've got 4 counterspells which allow us to counter a spell and also draw a card. We've got Exclude, counter a creature spell, draw a card. Dismiss, counter a spell, draw a card. Cryptic Command, probably the best one, has 4 modes on it. We can counter a spell and draw a card, or we can return a permanent to its owner's hand, or tap all creatures in opponent's control. All 4 of those modes can be relevant. And then Mystic Confluence, very similar to Cryptic Command. It has the 3 modes on it. We can do all 3 of them in any combination. Having spells like this is very important because one thing the deck runs the risk of is potentially running out of gas. If you just use up all your counter spells and don't have any card draw, you can just run out of things to do. So we are playing some spells like this as well as a few cards which are just pure card advantage so we don't run out of gas. We've got a couple of cards here which are very similar to each other but are both very important. Summary Dismissal and Mindbreak Trap. Both of these cost 4 mana. Mindbreak Trap could potentially cost 0. Summary Dismissal says exile all other spells and counter all abilities. Mindbreak Trap says exile any number of target spells. These are very important because they're counter spells which don't actually counter, they exile the spells. That's important because there are some cards which say they can't be countered, something like potentially Dragon Lord Dramoka maybe? Since these don't counter, they exile, you can essentially counter uncounterable things with these cards. Here are some big counter spells at 5 mana which allow us to counter something and get some advantage in another way on top of that. Gale's Redirection here is similar to the previous 2 cards because it also exiles a spell, it doesn't actually counter it. This one though says you roll a d20 and add that spell's mana value. If you roll a 1 through 14, you can cast the exile card for as long as it remains exiled, spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it, but if you get 15 plus, you can cast the exile card without paying its mana cost. So you can do some cool stuff with this. Spell Swindle, very important, costs 5 mana, however. Counter spell, create X treasure tokens where X is that spell's mana value. This can ramp us by a lot, which can be very important. Confirm Suspicions counters a spell, and you investigate 3 times, so you can basically draw 3 cards off of this counter spell. And then Desertion is similar to Gale's Redirection, however it says counter target spell if an artifact or creature is countered this way. Put that card onto the battlefield under your control instead of into its owner's graveyard. So once again, you can do some really cool stuff with this. Got a couple of 6 mana counter spells here. The first one isn't really 6 mana though because you can convoke it to discount that cost. Choose one or both, counter a spell or draw 2 cards then discard a card. So this is good because you can cast it on the cheap with your Drakes and also it's a counter spell that can get you card advantage. And then Sublime Epiphany here. This card just does so much. Choose one or more so you can choose all of them. Counter a spell, counter activated or triggered ability, return an on-land permanent to its owner's hand, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and target player draws a card. So yes, it does quite a lot. And now the section that some of you may have been waiting for, the free counter spells. And yes, these are very important because as I mentioned before, when you play your Talrand, you want to be able to play it and protect it in the same turn. So we have this foil here. This one can be very costly because in order to play it for free, we need to discard an island and another card. But sometimes it's worth the price, 3 for 1 yourself to counter something when you're tapped out. That can be worth it. Disrupting Shoal, we can remove a blue card with converted mana cost X in our hand from the game rather than pay Disrupting Shoal's mana cost. So we need things to line up right in order for this to work the way we want to, but we can sculpt the game in that way and essentially cast this for free. Fierce Guardianship, it's, a super staple in Commander. We're playing it. Pact of Negation, Force of Negation, and Force of Will. So potentially 6 free counterspells right here. We also have this one extra counterspell here, which we're playing in a land slot, but it's a counterspell with a land on the back. So that's all the counterspells. Now let's get to some cards which are not counterspells. There's not that many of them. We have 2 instants here. Lundy Vision, we're playing this in a land slot, basically just as some added value in the deck. And then also Cyclonic Rift. We're playing blue when we're playing Commander, so we're playing Cyclonic Rift, but also the games can get kind of long and drawn out with this deck, and you do want access to something like this just to be able to make the game end. We're playing 1 sorcery in this deck, Solve the Equation, 3 mana, sorcery, search your library for an instant or sorcery card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So basically, this is a sorcery that lets us tutor for a counter spell. But it's similar to Mission Briefing in that this gets you 2 Talrand triggers out of a counterspell, kind of, because you cast the Solve the Equation, you trigger Talrand, then you cast the thing you tutored for, you trigger Talrand again. Outside of our commander, we're only playing 2 creatures, and both of these serve the same purpose. Wavebreak Hippocamp, 3 mana, 2/2. Whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, draw a card. And Archmage Emeritus, 4 mana, 2/2. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. So this is just card advantage. This is a way for us to ensure that we don't run out of gas, because whenever we counter stuff, we can draw cards and draw more counter spells. We've got a few enchantments here, once again, to get card advantage and make sure we don't run out of gas. Search for Azcanta is very cool because we can play it early at just 2 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library, you can put it into your graveyard. Then if you have 7 more cards in your graveyard, you can transform this. So basically, at the beginning of your upkeep, you surveil 1. When it transforms, though, not only does it ramp you, because it turns into a land, has this activated ability, you can pay 3 mana and tap it to look at the top 4 cards of your library. You can reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put it into your hand. So this can get us, this is actually very good. It gets us card advantage and allows us to select what we're taking. So I do like this one a lot. Then we've also got both Future Sight and Precognition Field. They're very similar. Look at the top card of your library. You can cast it if it's an instant or sorcery. Then you can pay 3 mana and exile the top card of your library on Precognition Field here. Or there's Future Sight. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play the top card of your library. So with these, we can really be digging through our deck and ensure that we always have a counterspell. 2 more enchantments to get card advantage, and also to go with the annoying theme in the deck. Normally I don't play these cards because not only are they annoying for the opponent, they're also annoying for me to play because I don't want to be having to remind people of these triggers all the time, so I usually don't include them in my decks, but in this deck I'll make an exception. So we've got Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study. And then 1 more here, Kindred Discovery. We don't really want to be tapping out on our turn so much, but this can be worth it because this can get so much card advantage. It's a 5 mana enchantment. It says, when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield or attacks, draw a card. So what we're going to do with this is choose Drake. That means whenever we cast an instant or sorcery or counter something with Talrand, we make a Drake, we draw a card, and then whenever we attack with our Drakes, we draw cards. So we'll be drawing a lot of cards with this. Now, we do need to be playing some ramp, and seeing as we're playing mono blue, that's going to come in the form of artifacts. So we've got Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Thought Vessel, Felwar Stone, Sapphire Medallion, and this new one, Throne of Eldraine. This one is very cool, and I feel like this is incredible in literally any monocolor deck. It's a big one, 5 mana, but it's good. As it enters the battlefield, choose a color. So we're going to choose blue. Tap, add 4 mana of the chosen color. Spend this mana only to cast monocolored spells of that color. That's not a problem for us. Or 3 tap, draw 2 cards. Spend only mana of the chosen color to activate this ability. So yeah, we're tapping out 5 mana on our turn to play this, but this is worth it. Only 2 more non-land cards, but they're both very powerful. First one is Isochron Scepter here. Basically what we're doing with this is just putting a counter spell on it. So, when we have Isochron in play, we essentially always have access to a counter spell. And then Coat of Arms. Once again, we need a way to finish the game, and Coat of Arms can do that for us. So we don't actually need this. You can win just by attacking with Drakes. But if you play a Coat of Arms, that's going to happen a lot faster because you're not attacking with 2/2s anymore. You're attacking with, I don't know, 12/12s or 14/14s or something. One thing just to keep in mind, though, is this is a symmetrical effect, so it can help your opponents too. So you don't necessarily want to just play this and have the game play out. Probably what I do with this is wait until I have enough drakes to win this turn, then I'd play this and attack and hopefully win right there. Now for the lands. In total, there are 40 lands in this deck, and that might seem like kind of a high number. However, this is a control deck, and in control decks, you always want to make your land drop. So we want to do what we can to ensure that we're not missing any land drops. So there are 38 here, plus these 2 spell lands. There are some utility lands here which can be quite useful. We've got Tolaria West. We can transmute this into any one of our other lands, or into a Pact of Negation, which can be very important. Both Rivendell and Castle Vantress can help us scry and filter our card selection. Memorial to Genius enters the battlefield tapped, which is not great, but we can sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. With Mystic Sanctuary, we can reuse something out of our graveyard. Otawara is very important because it allows us to interact with the opponent at instant speed in a way which is not countering their spell. Blast Zone is removal on a land. War Room is card advantage on a land. Reliquary Tower is Reliquary Tower. And then Demolition Field is, land destruction on a land. And then the rest are just basic islands. I've gone with these cool old school Onslaught as well as Masks lands. So that is the Talrand deck. This deck is very fun to play. It's fun for you to play. It's probably not fun for your opponents. And as I mentioned before at the end of this video, you can see some highlights of gameplay footage and see the deck in action. And I'm very pleased with this deck because sometimes when I make a deck, I'll have an idea of how I want it to work and it doesn't really play out how I want it to. But with this one, it worked exactly the way that I had planned, and that was very satisfying. So you can see those highlights, and also I'll put up a video of the full gameplay for you to watch as well. One card you might notice missing from the deck is Baral, Chief of Compliance, which is a very similar kind of deck that plays a lot of counterspells, but I think Talrand is much better, because with Baral, you need to take up one of your precious deck slots on playing a win condition, usually something with Thassa's Oracle. With Talrand though, you can fill the entire deck with counterspells and win just through Talrand, because Talrand makes you drakes, and you use those drakes to win the game. Let me know what you think of the deck though. Have you played anything similar to this, and have you played a Talrand deck yourself as the commander? Talrand is a pretty strong meme card, so I feel like in order to make a commander deck with Talrand as the commander, you almost kind of need to build something like this, which is just ridiculous. If you would like to purchase a Talrand for yourself, or any other Magic cards for that matter, you can get those by going to face2facegames.com. They're the largest Magic store in Canada, and they also sponsor the channel, and you can use code 8thPlaceDavid at checkout to save 5% on your order. Also, I'd encourage everyone to come join my Discord server. You can find a link to that in the video description below. But thanks for watching though, and now let's get into the gameplay highlights. Land. Mystic Remora.
I'll try to pay 5 for Mirari's Wake.
Oh, that's a problem.
A little one.
Yeah, I think I need to spell pierce that.
No!
I'm gonna play an island and pass the turn.
How about a Terror of the Peaks?
Whoa!
Spell Swindle.
Whoa.
I'm gonna pay 4 of it.
Talrand.
To play Talrand.
Cast an Ancient Copper Dragon.
I wanna pay 2 and remand that.
I'm gonna attempt to pay 5 for Starfield of Nyx.
I'm gonna pay 2 and Wizard's Retort.
Doxidus?
Ooh.
I'm gonna Tail's End to counter the triggered ability.
I would like to see if Ozolith, the Shattered Spire, resolves.
And I'm gonna dismiss that.
Ancient Silver Dragon?
That seems like a good card. I'm gonna play Desertion. I'd like that dragon. So I'll send 7 Drakes at you, Bub. I'm gonna play Isochron Scepter. And I'm gonna exile Abjure. 17.
17 cards.
Draw 17 cards. I have no maximum hand size. I think I'm just gonna kill you though.
I mean, you don't have to kill me.
You can kill Mark.
No, I'm pretty sure I have to kill you. I'm just gonna Isochron and I'll sacrifice a Drake to counter that and I'll make a Drake.
I'll cast a Karthus.
I have a
Tyrant of
response.
Jund.
I can't cast spells, but I can channel Otawara to bounce Dramoka.
Hold up.